Welcome back to the Coach Changemakers Academy. This is lesson 2, which is all about laying the foundations for your signature program. So you're probably asking yourself at this very moment, okay, Bené, how do I get from my top 3 challenges to my signature program? Because you've just gone out to market, you've asked this great question and got all this gold back from your ideal client. So what's next? I know you're dying to get there and do this next step. So here it is. And here's this beautiful picture of me. And I'm showing you something that I call the A to Z diagram. And I just wanted to show you a picture because it looks really clean when I show you the PowerPoint presentation. But when you actually draw it, it can look a bit chaotic. And that's exactly what we're going for. So what is the A to Z diagram? It is basically A is where your ideal client is right now. And this is so important to know because this is where they think they are in their mind, in their language right now. And that is everything that you've just gathered in your top 3 challenges question that you've just gone out to market with. That's getting their problem where they think they're stuck right now in their words. And Z is where they're going to be at the end of your transformational signature program when all the crap that's coming up for them now at A is actually sorted through and they've learned everything they need to learn to see the other side. And then the arrow connecting the A to the Z is the transformational process and content that you take them through to get through to the other side. Okay, so that's at a high level, and we'll go into some detail about how you actually use your top 3 challenges survey results to actually tease this out for your own coaching business. So there's 3 steps. First is you're going to plot the survey data that you've got to point A. Once you've done that, we're going to clearly define point Z. You have to know where you are now, or your ideal clients are now, and you have to know where they're going. So, all right, this makes pretty good sense. And then, of course, we've got to figure out the steps to connect up the A to Z. And it's just amazing how every time you just go through this little process, the steps just fall out and just fall right into place. So let me show you how it's done. So the first step is to plot your data on A, which is that first circle where your ideal client is right now. So the steps for plotting, I've got a couple of tips and things for you, is basically, yes, you plot your answers from the top 3 challenges question that you got in the language of your ideal clients. A really important thing to consider at this point is to just let go of all the assumptions and ego and what you think you know and what you think you need to teach at this stage, okay? That can come in later, but at this stage, you're just mapping exactly what your clients have told you without any sort of processing or thinking about it too much, okay? Because what we really want to know to be able to create a signature program that sells is what do they need, and when you let go of your assumptions and ego and what you want to teach, that will really help you see the light a lot easier, okay? Okay, so the next thing is to be in tune with the energy of the responses, and you can read between the lines. I'm becoming quite an expert at this because I've done it so many times now, but you know, you're all coaches, you're in that space, you're receptive and good communicators, and so when you're reading those answers, see what you're reading between the lines. Sometimes you feel like, oh wow, there's a lot of anger here, oh wow, there's a lot of fear here. Just see what the overarching energy is, because that'll be really useful for you when you're thinking about meeting your clients where they are now and helping them through that transformational process. So that's a little advanced bonus tip for you there, to be in tune with that energy and see what you're reading between the lines. Trust your intuition, because all of these words coming back to you are actually telling you a powerful story, and they've got an energy to them. Okay, and then what we're going to be doing really is we're going to be looking for the big patterns that come out and that start, and the concepts that overlap between all respondents, and you're going to keep a tally. And I want to show you what this looks like. We've got an example of an actual live recording that I'll let you listen to of me working through this with Atia and Dwayne. And here's what their A to Z diagram came to look like, or their point A came to look like after we went through their 40 responses that they got back on their question. And I think most of these came from Facebook. So you can see that we basically what they did is they would read out a response, and then if it wasn't already on the A diagram, we'd write it in pretty much the words that the ideal client used. We would use simplification. We would simplify it down to a word or phrase just to keep the diagram a little bit tidier. And then every time a word repeated, we'd start to keep a list of how many times it was said. So, for example, in their situation, kids, the topic of kids and family came up quite a lot. So you can see that 8 times that specific word was mentioned. And actually, they didn't say family. I think they said kids. So that's really, really important that, your signature program, if 8 people, the other ones are 2, some people just said 1. So that's a topic that you've got to cover in your signature program. Otherwise, it's not going to be addressing the pain point as your ideal client sees it. Some other big ones were, this is an interesting one because see my worth and insecurities, low self-esteem, and settling for less. Those were phrases that we felt went together, even though they were using slightly different words. But when it comes to our marketing, there's all of these great words that we can use to explain what's going on in our ideal client's mind. But you can see when we counted all those like words together, that was 7. So that was quite a high energy response from these ideal clients. Okay, and then you can see money and finances got 6, and then some of the other ones 2, and some of them only had 1. And that's really what you're supposed to do. Just go through each response one by one, read out the first respondent with their 3 challenges, and if all 3 of them aren't on your A diagram, write them all in. You can see why in my beginning picture it got a little bit messy because I'm scribbling all over the place and adding tallies and adding words that are like each other. So hopefully you can follow that pretty easily. It's basically just you're mapping out exactly what data you've got around the A bubble, because it helps you just to get a visual and then to start to see some patterns. Okay, so then the next point in defining your A to Z diagram is then, now that you've got A all figured out, where they are now, where they think they are now, in their words, then you've got to think about Z. And you don't need as much detail here, but it is really important when you're thinking about, when we're fleshing out the middle bit, that you understand where you're going to, right? What is the transformation that you're going to deliver based on where they are now? And a good question to ask yourself is, what happens to your ideal client's life when all the stuff at A is fixed or is resolved through your transformational program? And then just write a couple of, I call them little petals. Draw a couple of little petals. One is actually just fine from the Z point, just so you know the big outcomes. And 1 to 3 is plenty. 1 is plenty, just so you've got that. Okay, here's where they are now, and then Z, this is what's going to happen when they're done. And then I'll give you an example in Dwayne and Atia's map. And we basically teased out that their couples that they work with in their transformational program by the end are going to realize their own self-worth. That's a really important outcome. They're going to understand the reality of relationships, and they're going to be able to have the skills to create a happy and healthy relationship, or they're going to know that they need to end their relationship. So those are some outcomes that is part of the transformational process that Dwayne and Atia want to deliver through their program. Okay, so that's a pretty easy step, but it's, before you can actually map out that middle bit, that middle black arrow, you got to know what you're heading to. So, and that is more of you reflecting, I suppose, on what you found and where they are now, and your knowledge and your expertise and what you want to deliver. And most of you already have that information within you now, so you don't need any more work. It's just an opportunity for you actually to write that transformation that you want to bring into the earth down. Okay, so then we can go to the next step. But before we go to the next step, in our handy little creative process tracker spreadsheet, you've got a little tab in there that helps you capture your A to Z data. This is really important. The bubble little diagrams, I actually recommend getting a big piece of paper, an A4 or a letter, or even bigger, and actually drawing it by hand and then writing out your little bubbles and then the flower petals that come off of it. It's quite a nice kinesthetic process, and it helps you integrate and connect with your content even more. But once that's done, you might want to actually just scrunch that up in a ball and throw it away. But that data is actually gold for down the track, your marketing, your sales material. So make sure you just capture those words that you've got in your A to Z diagram in your spreadsheet so that you can refer to them later when it comes to writing your sales material and so on. Okay, so just a little documentation activity before you move on to the next step, which is the third part of this process of laying your foundations for your signature program. And this is now that you've got your A and now that you've got your Z all figured out, we need to map out what are the big steps that need to happen to get people from where they are now through to that transformation. And the way that I love to start doing this is just look at your A diagram, look at all of your petals, and just start ordering them. You say, okay, I've got to number these, 1 through 10, or 1 through how many ever you've got. Which one's first? A good question to ask yourself is, what does your ideal client need to learn first to be able to take the first step towards their transformation? And a lot of times that first step could be, looking within themselves, or doing some core work, or maybe in business type programs, sometimes it's doing a foundational self-assessment of your business, like doing your numbers and doing laying some data out so that you can track growth. So what is the first step? And it's usually looking at where they are now in some form or another. If it's personal or if it's for a business, a lot of time it starts with them. It doesn't have to be that way, but through my experience and seeing a lot of programs being fleshed out over the years, that tends to be a great starting point. But see what your story tells you. Everybody has a unique journey that they're going to take their clients through. Okay, then walk in his or her shoes. Like I really, even sometimes close my eyes and say, okay, I've just, had this transformational first step. And then now what do I want next? How am I feeling? What am I telling myself? What am I visualizing? And then I look at my petals and my A diagram and then say, okay, based on all that, this is what I actually need to learn next, because to meet me where I am. And a lot of times, especially if if your clients are new to, say, looking at values or looking deeply at themselves, they could be going through some emotional stuff. So it's really important to take all of that in when you're planning out your steps. And because sometimes you can be like, oh wow, that was really deep and heavy, and they need a bit of a break now. Or, oh, that was really dry and boring, so let's jazz something up and do something, a little bit fun now. So think about the flow and the rhythm. You don't have to think too much. So my last point in there is these are still going to change. So nothing is set in stone at this stage. I work with mud maps, and I really believe that, it's not till you run your signature program 2, 3, 4 times that it actually starts to solidify. And then even then, it's always changing, because you're always changing. You're always learning more yourself about your niche area, and your clients are always showing you examples of new great stuff too. So it's always an organic and an evolutionary process. But I think the more you can accept and embrace and be really comfortable with that, the better you're gonna go through this whole process. It's kind of like, I don't know if any of you are artists, but if you're a painter or a sculptor, you're always adding a little bit and taking a little bit away, and adding a little bit and taking a little bit away. And that's really what this process is like too. Okay, but we need to get these big steps mapped out. So just so that we've got something substantial that we can start to work with, we can start to mold. Okay, so back to our A to Z diagram. If I go in and I number Dwayne and Atia's, after we talked about it, it was really clear that step 1 in their situation for their couples, they needed to see their self-worth and look at themselves basically first. So that was step 1. in their process. And then after they did that, they realized actually the partners actually need to have a conversation with each other. And so communication was the next one. And that's an interesting one, because even though communication was only it was only actually said by one person, it was actually a really important next step. So you don't always have to go on the big numbers if you know as a coach that they need to have this communication or something to happen actually before they can take that next step. So I thought that was a really nice example that and for the most part in this program, we went with all the big hitters, that had high numbers. But every once in a while, you actually need to intervene and put some coachy, your knowledge in there to, like, these people have to talk. If they're going to be able to have a happy and healthy relationship, but it's probably not where most of them are now, and that's why they're having problems, right? So that makes really a lot of sense in this particular situation. Okay, so we've got the 1, 2, and then it was just kind of, okay, then it's all these strategies that to actually manage the reality of just being in a couple. You got to manage your kids, you have to manage your sex life, you got to manage your money and finances. So that just flowed really well. And then for the most part, we thought that a lot of the other concepts kind of be covered by those first 5. So we just left them out. This might change down the track. They they might pull in other elements. That's totally fine. All you need right now is to go with sort of the big picture story that this is telling you, so that you can make a start. This is just about laying a foundation so that we can start building something. Okay, so that is how you start to tease out your steps. And then what I like to do, once I've got my A to Z diagram mapped out like that, then with lots of the numbers around the A component, to start to tease out that transformation process is a really great way. Most of you guys are probably going to pilot your signature program one-on-one with a client, or with I like piloting with 6 clients one-on-one. And the reason I really love that process is that it lets you road test your material and then calibrate directly, with what's working, what's not working energetically with your client. And then by the time the next pilot, you go into a group format so you can leverage your time. You don't have to do it like that. I've had clients who get their signature program mapped out and then they go straight to running a group. That's totally fine. So it's really what you feel the most comfortable with. For me, I wanted really to road test content in my process, and it was fantastic. I'm so glad I did that, and it really fit with my lifestyle at the time too. So you take lifestyle into my. Okay, I'm going on a bit of a tangent. So the question I'd like you to ask yourself, once you've got your A to Z diagram mapped out, just like the last slide, is how many one-on-one sessions do I need to get one client through all of those big steps? So in this situation, how many coaching sessions would it take to get someone from 1 to 5? And ideally what we're looking for is it needs to be at least 6, and it can be up to how many ever you need, but at least 6, okay? Because a signature program, it needs to be at least 6. It probably needs to be more than that, 12 or more. Okay, and then once, just to help you tease that out and so that you can capture it, I've added a new tab into the Creative Process Tracker spreadsheet, and it's just your A to Z session, so you can map them out, and I've just put some numbers in there so you can see where the numbers go, but add as many or as few. You can take numbers away, you can add numbers, but just put in there, okay, so session 1, we're going to do some sort of a self-esteem test. Session 2, we're going to reflect on the test and look at who knows what. And session 3, we're actually going to write a letter to our partner. Session 4, that just is just for us. It's a journaling exercise. Session 4, and we're going to talk about that. Session 4, we're going to actually bring the couple together and have a facilitated. It doesn't matter. Like, I'm just making stuff up. But you just want to start working through your numbers and in your A, and start saying, okay, if I'm actually going to take people through all this content, how many coaching sessions would I actually do? And imagine you have an hour, you have 90 minutes max. How much can you actually cover if you're just coaching somebody one-on-one through that material? And you'll just start to see some really great stuff comes out. And for some of you, really impulsive and ready to go, like this is almost enough to go to validation calls. But I know that through my experience, other people like to have a whole lot more detail and processing and understanding and time with their mat before they go to validations calls. So we're gonna spend a little bit more time and tease this out even further. But just this is gonna get you a long way into your thinking about how your signature program is going to start to shape up. And I guarantee you from now and before we actually launch, it's going to change a lot. So just know that that's coming and be cool with that. But doing these little steps just helps you, I guess, get over that hump in your thinking and push you into that realm of possibility so that tomorrow and next week when you wake up, we can take you even further and take you even further. So we just kind of keep adding on layers to expand your thinking even more. This is just a baby step that's going to get you really excited, and you're going to already start seeing how amazing this can be. But we're going to go a lot deeper in the next lesson. Okay, so let's just do a quick summary. So the first step is to plot your survey data that you got from your top 3 challenges survey onto point A. And then once you've done that, clearly define the transformation at the end at point C. Just 1 to 3 points is fine, but just so you've got that really clear in your mind. And then you map out the big steps that get you from A to Z, and that's simply by ordering the main things that stand out to you that you need to cover in your signature program in point A, from point A. So you're really not adding a whole lot of stuff. In the example that I gave you with Dwayne and Atia, they actually, I guess gave more value to one of their elements, but they actually didn't add that much, or they didn't add anything to it. They just used a lower rated one. Okay, that's a bit of a tangent. We'll have time in the call to go through this and answer any questions that you've got. So I hope you enjoy the process. It's phenomenal how this really starts to just lay a foundation, and you can see a little journey starting to happen. And it may or may not be the journey that you expected when you first started and you first started thinking about your niche. And that's totally fine. What's that showing you is that you're really listening to what your ideal clients are telling you that they need, and you're responding to their pain points and delivering what they need, which means that you are serving your ideal clients, which is what we are all here for. We are all here in a service business. So that means you're on track. Okay, I look forward to talking you through this again and answering any questions you have in the upcoming call. I think that's a wrap. So have a good one and happy coaching.